When Angela Lansbury was only 9 years old, she suffered a heartbreaking loss that she later revealed was the defining moment of her life. As she grew up in London, her interest in school made way for a passion for cinema. She was a dreamer and a self-proclaimed movie maniac. In 1940, as World War II surrounded them, Angela and her family had no choice but to flee England. But they were oblivious to how severe the danger actually was. The very same day they sailed from Liverpool bound for America, the city came under fire. She'd escaped just in the nick of time, safe and sound aboard a steamship, a brand new adventure on the horizon. When it came to acting, Angela had no qualms about lying to get what she wanted. Her mother, Moina, was also an actress, and while she was working in a Canadian production, Angela found herself in Montreal. At 16 years of age, the aspiring actress pretended to be 19 to snag her very first theater role in a nightclub. In 1942, Lansbury followed her mother to the promised land of Hollywood, but she quickly discovered that not all that glitters is gold. While trying to make it as an actress, she toiled alongside her mother at an LA department store. However, when her mother got fired, life got even harder. The entire family depended on Angela and her meager $28 a week. As she struggled to make ends meet, her dream of becoming a famous actress seemed further away than ever before. In a world obsessed with Rita Hayworth and Lauren Bacall, Angela Lansbury wasn't quite like the seductive sirens that were all the rage in Hollywood. What few auditions she did manage to get only ended in disappointment. But it was only a matter of time before she got her big break. Angela's mother knew how to throw a party, and it was this flourishing social circle that got her foot in the door. At one of these infamous socials, Angela met the scriptwriter for 1944's Gaslight, John Van Druten, and he put in a good word for her. It was a golden opportunity, destined to transform the 17-year-old's life forever. She's a Tartar, ain't she? What do you mean by that? The film was a huge success, and suddenly Angela had a 7-year contract with MGM, a salary, and an Academy Award nomination. Her world had turned upside down in the best way possible. There was no slowing down. Her next few films continued to build her reputation. It's that cat. I thought I saw its eyes move. Lansbury first set eyes on actor Richard Cromwell when she was just a young girl collecting fan magazines. However, her recent brush with fame allowed her to meet the dashing actor in the flesh. Although he was 15 years her senior, she was completely besotted. Infatuation blinded her in the way that first love usually does. Cromwell impressed her with compliments and attentiveness. His intellect and worldliness dazzled her. And so, when he asked for her hand in marriage, Angela had her answer at the ready. On top of that, your support helps keep the channel going. Click the link in the description for more details. Her life with Cromwell was one of endless entertainment. But beneath the glamour, trouble began to brew. Something was wrong with her husband. He suffered from excruciating migraines and asthma attacks. But ultimately, his biggest demon was his drinking. Less than a year after tying the knot, Angela came home one day and made a disturbing discovery. Her husband's car was gone, and his closet was completely empty. That's when she found a chilling note sitting on the piano. It said, "I'm sorry, darling. I just can't go on." She had no idea why Cromwell had decided to desert her. In the months that followed, she began to blame herself for her husband's betrayal. It had completely shattered her self-worth. Desperate to get to the bottom of what happened, she contacted her husband's psychiatrist, who assured her that it wasn't her fault. After that conversation, she finally had her answer. Her husband was gay. She surmised that Cromwell had only married her in an attempt to change his own romantic preferences. Clearly, he had failed spectacularly. After having her heart broken into 1,000 pieces, this revelation changed the young actress irrevocably. Only 5 months after the divorce went through, fate stepped in again. She'd been invited to actor Hurt Hatfield's star-studded party in Ojai Valley. When she insisted she wouldn't be able to make it because she didn't have a ride, Hatfield came to the rescue. He knew a dashing, aspiring actor that could drive her there. When Peter Shaw drove up in his rented car, Lansbury couldn't believe her eyes. He was the most gorgeous thing ever seen on 2 feet. During their 8-mile drive to the Ojai Valley, the two strangers became fast friends. Their conversations flowed effortlessly, and by the time they arrived, her charm had him hooked. From that fateful meeting onward, Lansbury and Shaw began to date. However, there was one problem that cast a shadow over the couple's happiness. While Angela continued to make films in Hollywood, her new boyfriend struggled. He just couldn't seem to get a movie under his belt, and it wasn't long before she discovered why. When she read with him for a screen test, she made a horrifying realization. He was a terrible actor. So, before the studio even called to reject him, she lovingly hit him with the hard truth. However, the screen test wasn't a total bust. Director Frank Capra, although less than impressed with Shaw's performance, was equally as intrigued by Lansbury. Capra wanted her to be in his film State of the Union, alongside Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy. This was an incredible opportunity she couldn't turn away from. Meanwhile, her lover floundered. Simply put, Peter Shaw was never going to be an actor. In fact, it wasn't long before the studio canceled his contract altogether. Lost in limbo, he resorted to painting houses while he figured out his next move. Finally, he settled on becoming a talent agent, representing other actors. After healing from her first disastrous marriage, Lansbury was finally ready to become a wife all over again. On August 12, 1949, the couple tied the knot, and after a relaxing honeymoon in the south of France, it was time for Lansbury to get back to work. The Three Musketeers promised to be an exciting film, but Angela Lansbury was far from satisfied with her role. She believed her age suited the role of the young Lady de Winter, and yet the studio wanted her for the mature, sinister role of Queen Anne. Finally fed up, the actress did what few dared to do in Hollywood. She strolled into Louis B. Mayer's office to state her case, telling him the role she truly wanted to play. His response was a painful wake-up call. In her autobiography, this was the moment she realized that she would not go to the top of the class at MGM. As meteoric as her rise to fame had been, Lansbury now experienced a disheartening decline. She certainly felt the dismal quality of the roles coming in. Sensing an imminent end, the actress decided to cut the cord before she got shut out entirely. In 1952, Lansbury left MGM for good. But while the future seemed dark and uncertain, this wasn't the end of the road. The very same year she left MGM, she took on another daunting new role. She gave birth to her first child, Anthony. With a growing brood and no film contract to speak of, her career was at an all-time low. After giving birth to her daughter, Deirdre, in 1953, Lansbury became a freelance actress. But it only dug her into a deeper hole of disappointment. According to her, Hollywood made her old before her time. Even in her 20s, many people assumed she was in her 40s based on the character she played. It was a curse that continued to stalk her. But that wasn't her only source of melancholy. She doted on her children, and more than anything, wanted them by her side. But as much as she tried to put them before her career, she couldn't deny the truth. Her work often took her far and away from them for extended periods of time. In 1966, Angela got her first big break on Broadway with her performance in Mame. It was the kind of role she'd always dreamed of. While working with MGM, she'd watched musical actors like Gene Kelly and Leslie Caron in rehearsal, yearning to be a part of it all. She had never sung and danced while playing a leading role, so she had to prove herself in a big way. Lansbury stole the show. At 41 years old, she'd finally bagged her first starring role. And to go with it, she took home a Tony Award for Best Leading Actress in a Musical. The reviews were a welcome burst of light that bolstered her wavering self-esteem. Angela had reignited her career, but sadly it wasn't enough to turn Hollywood's head. When the actress learned that Mame was being adapted into a major film, she got her hopes up, only to have them dashed into a million pieces. She wanted the role so badly but it went to Lucille Ball instead. The 60s were a strange time for Angela Lansbury. On one hand, she cleaned up on Broadway and catapulted to renewed fame, but on the other, her family life was in shambles. While busy entertaining her audiences, Lansbury's children had gotten caught up in the counterculture of the 1960s. Both of them struggled with drug addiction. Anthony, in particular, was extremely troubled, and in 1970 he overdosed and ended up in a coma. Although utterly distraught, Lansbury had another problem to deal with. Danger also came for her daughter, Deirdre. Deirdre had fallen in with the worst crowd possible. She'd become entranced by the infamous cult leader, Charles Manson. In the midst of all this chaos, Lansbury's Malibu home caught fire and burned to the ground. It was the final straw. Around this time, she had starred in a play that flopped. The musical Pretty Belle was described as a complete and utter fiasco. Even Lansbury confessed that her performance was abysmal. This, on top of her troubled children and devastated home, caused her to make one of the most drastic decisions of her life. She wrangled her family together and ran for the hills, taking refuge in Ireland. Settling in a farmhouse in the rural County Cork, she poured her heart into rebuilding her broken foundation. Lansbury's life in California was like a nightmare she longed to forget. In fact, the actress took an entire year off acting to be with her children as they recuperated from their addictions. Only years earlier, she'd kicked her own terrible habit. Lansbury had smoked heavily for most of her life and had finally quit, just as her own children had fallen victim to vices of their own. Fortunately, the move to Ireland made all the difference. Her children did recover and even prospered. By the mid-70s, Angela had finally tired of making musicals, but when she went for a Shakespearean role in Hamlet, it ended badly. She received lukewarm reviews and hated the role. In 1975, she got the news that her mother had died in California. The last decade had been an undeniable whirlwind, and it seemed that life always had a curveball in store for her. Still, there was one opportunity she never saw coming. A TV show called Murder, she wrote. But the story behind why she took on the role isn't as romantic as it seemed. Quite simply, she took on one of her most iconic roles for the money. Her work in theater had been sliding downhill, and television was her chance to bolster her finances. Her role as amateur detective Jessica Fletcher continued to keep her career afloat. But as always, it also led to even deeper frustrations with an industry that had failed her time and time again. Although she earned 12 Emmy nominations for her role in Murder, she wrote she never won. Despite all her reservations about her career, however, Angela Lansbury accomplished what few Hollywood stars could. She managed to stay relevant beyond her youth and acted into her 90s. For the younger generations, she became best known for voicing the Disney character Mrs. Potts in Beauty and the Beast. However, in 2003, a tragedy almost ended her career entirely. The love of her life, Peter Shaw, succumbed to congestive heart failure. Devastated by the loss, Lansbury never thought she'd return to acting. Near the end of her life, before her death in 2022, Lansbury got herself wrapped up in a fresh scandal. With the changing of the times, discussions revolving around the harassment of women, particularly in Hollywood, have sparked some serious debates. Unfortunately, Lansbury had controversial opinions on the subject. Her comments about harassment and violence toward women had her trending on Twitter, and nobody ever wants to be trending on Twitter. She said that when it comes to sexual harassment, sometimes women have to take the blame for making themselves attractive. For a woman who'd worked in Hollywood alongside lecherous executives, her statements came as a shock. Angela Lansbury's journey from dreamer to stardom, from Hollywood outcast to TV legend, spanned 9 decades. But it all began with a stunning tragedy. When she was only 9 years old, her beloved father succumbed to stomach cancer, leaving Angela drowning in grief. In remembering the loss, she called it the defining moment of her life. She said, "Nothing before or since has ever affected me so deeply." Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.